Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you could join us for today's thorough exploration.
Yeah, really excited to get into this one. It's a huge topic.
It really is. So, to give you a quick overview of our mission today, we've got this massive stack of analysis on basically an under-the-radar financial purge happening in China right now.
Right.
And our goal is to decode how this isn't just, domestic bookkeeping. It is secretly a major, highly calculated maneuver in the global technology war.
Which is fascinating when you actually look at the numbers.
Oh, the numbers are staggering. Let me just hit you with the opening fact from the source material. Over 5,000 financial entities in China haven't just been, paused or given a stern warning.
No warnings.
Gone. They have been entirely removed from the system since 2023. 5,000.
Yeah, and the scale of what we are dealing with here is, frankly, it's difficult to conceptualize.
Right.
We're talking about a private fund industry worth 23 trillion yuan.
Wow.
Yeah, so converting that, it's at roughly 3.4 trillion US dollars.
That's massive.
It's one of the largest single pools of private capital on the planet. And I want to clarify the mission for you listening today. This isn't a story about catching rule breakers or punishing fraud.
Right. It's bigger than that.
Much bigger. It is a story about Beijing actively turning private money into strategic national power.
It's okay, imagine hiring a house cleaner, right? But instead of dusting your shelves, they walk in and start knocking down load-bearing walls and rerouting the plumbing.
Yeah, exactly.
This isn't just cleaning, it's a total structural re-engineering of their economy.
That is a perfect analogy. And to understand why China is destroying 5,000 funds,
Yeah.
we kind of have to look at why they built this massive financial machine in the first place.
Right, because they built it on purpose.
Exactly. This goes back to a major origin story in 2014. Basically, China opened the gates for private investment funds because they looked at the U.S. and wanted their own version of Silicon Valley's venture capital engine.
They wanted that exact same innovation machine.
Right, and it exploded. It grew into three main buckets. You had your hedge fund-style vehicles, your private equity and venture capital, and then these hybrid specialty funds.
But the problem, as the sources point out, is that the system bent under its own weight.
It really did.
Instead of funding, fundamental innovation as intended, it got infected. You had legitimate investors, sure, but you also had this wild influx of speculation and what the industry calls fund chaining.
Yeah, fund churning is a huge piece of this puzzle.
I mean, pushing clients around just to generate commission fees, and on top of that, just outright illegal fundraising.
Which birthed behaviors that were actively destroying the innovation they wanted.
So wait, I want to clarify something here about the China Securities Regulatory Commission, the CSRC. Was the government just, mad about the fraud, or were they more terrified of where the money was actually going?
Oh, it was definitely the latter. They were terrified. The ultimate fear for Beijing is what we call capital escape. Right. Unauthorized cross-border financial flows. China operates a highly restrictive capital control system, so massive outflows of domestic wealth are fundamentally prohibited.
Right, because if the money leaves, they can't use it.
Exactly. If the elite wealth leaves through, unauthorized fund channels or complex offshore structures, Beijing loses its grip on the capital it desperately needs.
So if the money is escaping the country instead of building domestic tech, how does a highly controlled state actually plug those holes?
Well, they built a containment machine. And the regulators really moved aggressively in May of 2026.
Okay, what happened then?
They moved against major online brokers, specifically platforms like Futu, Tiger Brokers, and Longbridge.
Oh, right, because those were the platforms giving mainland investors unauthorized routes into overseas trading, right?
Exactly. They were effectively giving them an escape hatch. So regulators stepped in and gave them a forced wind-down period.
Oh.
Now, if you look at the big picture, this is essentially Beijing's two-wall containment system.
Two walls. Okay, break that down for us.
So the outer wall blocks unauthorized capital from leaving. That's stopping the brokers.
Right.
And then the inner wall cleans up how capital circulates inside the country. That's deleting those 5,000 bad funds we talked about.
Okay, so imagine a giant reservoir of water.
Yeah.
The government spent a decade filling it up, and now they are patching all the leaks on the outside walls, and they're putting heavy industrial filters on the inside.
That's a great way to look at it.
Because the goal is to trap this huge pool of private capital inside the system where it can be heavily supervised.
Precisely. Once you have $3.4 trillion trapped,
Yeah.
you can dictate exactly where it goes.
Which brings us to, well, where exactly are they forcing it to flow? And this introduces a key phrase from our sources, which is patient capital.
Patient capital. It sounds so mild, doesn't it?
It does, but the reality is anything but mild. Normal venture capital, like the free market money in Silicon Valley, it wants a return in maybe 7 to 10 years.
Right, which is great for consumer apps and software.
Exactly. You write code, scale a user base, and cash out. But that timeline is completely useless for hard tech.
Completely useless, because hard tech things like advanced chip supply chains, that takes 15 years.
Right.
AI infrastructure, robotics, quantum systems, you are looking at a decade of heavy losses and failures before you even see a breakthrough, let alone a profit.
But free market capital hates waiting. Like, it actively despises it. It wants a fast exit.
Always.
So is Beijing essentially looking at this impatient money, locking the doors, and forcing it to sit still for 15 years?
Yes, that is exactly what is happening. The CSRC's new framework explicitly encourages, or rather forces, long-term capital to abandon quick speculation.
Wow.
They want that tracked capital sitting inside strategic technologies, semiconductors, AI, advanced manufacturing, next-gen energy, the places where China wants total independence from foreign pressure.
Which really brings up the geopolitical chessboard. Why the sudden massive rush to build domestic hard tech right now?
It all comes down to the U.S.-China technology rivalry. When Washington restricts advanced chips and AI hardware, Beijing's response isn't just, diplomatic anger.
Right, it's domestic mobilization.
Exactly. They realize they can't just rely on state subsidies and bank loans anymore. They need private capital to march in the exact same direction as the state.
Which is fascinating because it impartially lays out two completely competing global models for how human innovation works.
Right.
On one side, you have Silicon Valley's model. This is pure market allocation.
Yeah, letting the market decide.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You let thousands of investors choose freely. You embrace creative freedom and chaos, and innovation will organically emerge from that. It's fast, and it creates these unexpected surprises.
And then on the other side, you have Beijing's model.
State-guided allocation.
Yes. Disciplined mobilization at an enormous scale, directing massive trapped resources precisely toward national strategic goals.
But this raises what I think is the most critical question from our investigation today.
What's that?
You can order capital to be patient, right? Sure. And you can physically force money to stay in the country. But can you command a breakthrough on a schedule? Like, doesn't real innovation require the kind of creative freedom and chaos that state control actively tries to suppress?
And that right there is the ultimate gamble of the next decade.
Yeah.
Because you can absolutely guarantee the money stays in semiconductors. You can lock it in.
Yeah.
But you cannot guarantee that forced patience will magically turn into human genius.
Wow. Right. You can't force a scientist to have a eureka moment just because you gave them trapped money.
Exactly. It is an incredibly high-stakes wager on whether scale and discipline can out-innovate freedom and chaos.
And for you listening, this is exactly why you should care about this.
Yeah, it affects everyone.
It really does. This isn't just some distant regulatory cleanup. It is the literal re-engineering of $3.4 trillion to directly challenge the West's technological dominance.
It's going to define the next phase of the global tech race.
Absolutely. It will eventually impact the chips in our cars, the AI we use every day, and just the overall global economic balance.
And I want to leave you with a final thought to kind of mull over, building on everything we've talked about.
Yeah, go ahead.
If China's state-guided, forced patient capital actually succeeds in outbuilding Silicon Valley in hard tech over the next 15 years.
Which is a big if, but yeah.
Right. But if they do succeed, will Western democracies eventually feel pressured to intervene in their own free markets to keep up with that level of concentrated long-term funding?
Oh, wow. Will we have to abandon pure market allocation just to survive against that mobilized scale?
Exactly. It really forces us to question if the free market can compete with a completely contained and weaponized financial system over a multi-decade timeline.
That is a fascinating, slightly terrifying thought to end on.
It really makes you think.
It does. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of the sources today. We hope this gave you a clearer picture of the massive shifts happening beneath the surface of the global economy.
Thanks for having me.
Remember to stay curious, and we will catch you next time.